I'm standing at the bottom of the steps of the Ramanashram dining room. Behind me is the main ashram well, and behind that is Bhagavan's Samadhi hall. This is the route by which everybody came to get their ashram meal from when this new dining room was opened in 1938 until Bhagavan passed away in 1950. And at the top of the stairs, hanging on the wall to my left, is a piece of railway line which has been here for as long as anyone can remember. This is the bell which summons everybody to lunch. I won't bash it right now, we might get an invasion of 50 people looking for an unscheduled meal. As I walk in, there's a large open space on the walls of which are lots of photos of old devotees of Bhagavan. This has been a tradition ever since the dining room was put up, that group photos of old devotees have always adorned the inside of the dining room. And occasionally when somebody asked Bhagavan about a particular person, he would say, oh, that photo is on the dining room wall, and somebody would fetch it and he would point it out. Walking around this way, we come to the spot where Bhagavan himself used to sit and eat his meals. This photo shows Bhagavan sitting on the floor eating his meal. This particular set of granite tiles was constructed after he passed away so that nobody could sit in Bhagavan's seat anymore. He would sit on the floor here and he would look at two different sections of people. On his left would be the non-Brahmin people, and on the right would be the Brahmin people. In Bhagavan's day, dietary caste distinctions were still quite widely observed. Bhagavan went along with them because he didn't want people to use him as an excuse to violate whatever dietary or caste habits they had at home. His general rule was, if you eat with everybody at home, then you can do that here. But if at home you eat with Brahmins and eat Brahmin food, then don't use me as an excuse to break that habit here. Eat with the Brahmins here. We've now positioned our camera in approximately the place that Bhagavan himself would eat. To the front and to the left of him would be all the non-Brahmin visitors, and to the right would be the Brahmins who chose for various reasons to eat by themselves. Bhagavan, in this position, he could see both communities, but the Brahmins couldn't see the non-Brahmins and vice versa. So this satisfied everybody. There is one interesting story of one of Bhagavan's own relatives, who was of course a Brahmin, who came here one day and tried to eat on the non-Brahmin side of the divide. Chinnaswami, who of course was his relative as well, told him off and told him to go and eat with the Brahmins. And this relative of Bhagavan said, I'm not a Brahmin anymore, and insisted on sitting on this side of the divide. Bhagavan heard the commotion, asked what it was all about, and then called over his distant relative and said, okay, you can sit by my side, which was absolutely unheard of. The man was quite pleased, but then Bhagavan said, I sit here because I'm the only person in this room who's neither a Brahmin nor a non-Brahmin. So if you feel that, you can sit next to me. And properly humiliated by his arrogance, the distant relative of Bhagavan went and sat on the Brahmin side of the dining room. I'm sitting next to the position where Bhagavan always sat in the dining room, and from this vantage point he could keep an eye on how well all the devotees were being served. This was very important to Bhagavan because he was a very, very strict egalitarian when it came to food. He wouldn't take anything on his plate unless he was satisfied that everybody else in the dining room had received a portion first. So he would keep an eye on, and particularly in the extremities of the dining room, he'd watch to make sure that if food was being served, people who were the farthest distance away actually got something on their plate. And there are a few occasions when he actually said, I'm not going to have anything on my plate until you've served it to everybody else in the dining room first. So if there isn't enough to go round, I'm the last person, I'm not going to get served myself. So this rule was very, very strict, but because people tended to revere and worship Bhagavan as someone very special. They tried to show their devotion by piling food on his plate. And there was an almost daily battle by Bhagavan trying to reduce the amount on his plate, reduce the types of thing that people were giving to him. But he always insisted that he would never ever taste anything unless every single person in this room had had at least a share of it as large as the one he was getting. So just one story, it wasn't a dining room story, it was a story about Maurice Friedman, who came here in the 1930s and decided that Bhagavan needed a bit of extra nourishment. So he brought, I think, a glass of orange juice, which he hand squeezed himself, presented it to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan said, "What about all these other people? I don't take anything that hasn't been served." Now Maurice was a bit of a go-getter, so he went off to town, brought a whole sack of oranges, hand squeezed 200 glasses of orange juice, and fed a glass of orange juice to everybody in the hall simply because he felt that Bhagavan would benefit from having a glass of orange. That Bhagavan accepted, but he said, "Okay, you've made your point and I've made my point, but from now on you don't need to go to extremes like this." So this was a hard and fast rule. You could not serve Bhagavan anything that everybody in the room hadn't been served, and if he thought you were being neglectful of serving duties, then he himself would go on temporary strikes. For example, if he thought that some people were not being served buttermilk properly or at all, or a watered down form because the servers were running out, he would spot with his eagle eye that someone 20 feet over there wasn't being properly served, and the next time that was offered to him, he would say no. He would just put his hand over his plate when the buttermilk server came, and then people would realize, okay, that means yesterday he spotted that someone wasn't being served correctly, and nothing would persuade him to take a glass that particular day. He realized that unless he had these periodic strikes, unless he physically stopped taking food that people wanted to give him, then the servers in the hall wouldn't give equal rations to everybody. Now, one interesting benefit of being a new person here is that a seat was reserved for you just in front of where Bhagavan is sitting, maybe about 5 or 6 feet over there. And this was often a completely unexpected surprise for new people. They would be ushered into the dining room at meal times, and somebody would point to this spot. And on your first, second, third day here, if there wasn't any competition from newer people, you would get to sit directly opposite from Bhagavan. And quite often that was the closest and the most intimate contact that new people would get. For now, I want to focus on 2 people for whom surrender was their goal, and whom, to the best of my ability, the best of my knowledge, actually succeeded. Now, the first lady is generally known in ashram books as Mudia Patti. She was born in a Tamil town called Karaikal, and her name was Alankaratani. Now, just as we came in, I spotted her photo on the dining room wall. This is Alankaratani, and that's her daughter-in-law, Kamakshi Amal. When she was living in Karaikal with her son, Sabaya, and her daughter-in-law, Kamakshi, they were serving a guru who was quite old and who told them he was soon to pass away. They went to him and said, "But what will we do after you pass away? We need some kind of help, we need a guru." And this guru must have had some good psychic powers, because he said, "You're going to have the good fortune after I die of having a far greater guru than I am. His name is Ramanashram, and he lives in Tiruvannamalai." Now that, in the first years of the 20th century, that was the name by which Bhagavan was known to everybody in Tiruvannamalai. It was only in 1907 that the name Ramana Maharishi took off after Ganapati Muni gave that name to Bhagavan. A few months after the family guru passed away, the son, Sabaya, came to Tiruvannamalai, presumably in search of Brahmanaswami. He found him, he was very impressed, and he called his mother and his wife to come to Tiruvannamalai to start serving this new guru. They established themselves in a house on the north side of the temple. Sabaya was very interested in pujas, temple ritual. He used to spend his morning in the Arunachala temple, whereas his mother and his daughter-in-law would prepare food for Bhagavan, take it to Virupaksha cave. The mother had an interest in doing puja to Bhagavan. She wanted personal worship as part of her practice. Bhagavan always refused to let people do puja to him, so she would collect flowers in town and then walk all the way up to Skandashram, where a photo of Bhagavan had been installed, and she would do her personal puja to Bhagavan in the little shrine inside the back portion of Skandashram. After a few years of serving in this way, I should mention that serving Bhagavan in those days wasn't as easy as it became in later years. When Mudia Patti, as she later became known, started to serve Bhagavan, you had absolutely no idea where he would be on a day-to-day basis. She had taken a vow that she wasn't going to eat until Bhagavan himself had eaten some of her food. And miraculously, over a period of 40 years, she managed to find him wherever he was every single day, managed to serve him some food before she herself ate any lunch. In those days, Bhagavan and Palaniswami would often go out together for periods of up to 10 days. They would just lock up Virupaksha cave, go on elongated pradakshinas, and nobody really knew where they were, except Mudia Patti, who learned all his hiding places, all his secret stopovers when he went round the hill. She would have intelligence from people who might have seen him pass. And even when the town was evacuated, everyone in town was ordered to leave because of bubonic plague. Mudia Patti hid on the hill where no one could find her, and every day she continued to find enough food to cook something, take it to Bhagavan and have him eat before she herself ate. That was an absolutely stupendous accomplishment, to find Bhagavan every single day for 10 or 20 years, when a lot of the time he was doing his best to hide and keep away from people. Ramaswamy Pillai, who really loved Mudia Patti, I spoke to him in the early 1980s, and he almost had tears in his eyes. He said, "We didn't really show respect to Bhagavan. We were young sadhus, we were pretty much having a good time at Ramanashram." He said it's people like Mudia Patti who showed all of us youngsters what true devotion was and what true service to the Guru was.